Good morning and welcome to Morning Scoop for Saturday, March 5th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The spring game is in 43 days, the Notre Dame game in 183 days, the game against Michigan in 266 days. We're combining a couple of positions in our spring preview series today, one that's as loaded with talent as any position group as any team in the country, and another one which might be the most uncertain, if any, around the field for the Buckeyes. We're talking wide receivers and we're talking tight ends. My guest is the host of the Big Me Kickoff podcast, Kevin Noon. Kevin, thanks for joining me.
Definitely.
So we're going to kind of combine these two because otherwise we're going to be doing a 45-minute show. But so you can give me a wide receiver answer, you can give me a tight end answer, or if you have an answer for both, you think someone fits on both of those position groups, you can give me both of those. Same 5 questions we've been doing for this whole series. First one is the guy with the most to gain this spring from one or both of those position groups.
Let me start with tight end, and I'm going to say Joe Royer, because you obviously lose Jeremy Ruckert at tight end, and the room is somewhat open at this point. And obviously, you have Mitch Rossi, you have some other names. There's another name that I'm saving for a later answer. I think that there is a lot of opportunity for Joe Royer to come out and show that he's the guy. We know historically Ohio State is not going to target the tight end a ton. You're asked to get, to earn your Buckeye leaves in other ways in terms of blocking and some things of that nature. I think that Joe Royer can do all that while still being a very solid offensive tight end. I will throw something out at receiver as well. I think that this is going to be a huge spring for Julian Fleming as somebody who we finally saw him in the Rose Bowl look like the player that he was supposed to be. And while he didn't have Jackson Smith and Jigba's numbers, while he didn't have Marvin Harrison Jr.'s numbers, we finally saw some glimpses. He had his first career collegiate touchdown. I think that this is going to be a chance for him to kind of do a, hey, remember me, I'm here. I'm every bit as highly recruited as some of these other guys. Let's all move on this bus together. So I think those are my 2 guys.
The wide receiver position is interesting because it feels like they've got 4 guys who probably could start this fall, and you're probably only starting 3 of them. Yeah, Fleming is one of them. Yeah, Emeka Egbuka, Harrison, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Yeah, that's a very interesting group. Now, the next one is another one where I feel like you could have an answer at wide receiver, you could have an answer at tight end. Who is this a make or break spring for?
I'm going to start at tight end, and I'm going to say G. Scott Jr. because he's somebody who moved from receiver to tight end. The belief was he was having a hard time really keeping within the weight. Obviously the depth chart was brutal for him, as well as a former 4-5 star kind of on that line. What does that end up looking like for him? Ohio State hasn't necessarily been a program that's employed a lot of that flex, but I think that if Ohio State really, I think if G. Scott Jr. has a big spring, he's so talented. He's somebody you need to kind of figure out a path for, but in doing so, when you're throwing him the ball, who are you not throwing the ball to? So you got to figure some of those things out. I think on the receiver side, I think that somebody that needs to have, that make type of season is going to be Jaden Ballard. He didn't necessarily get the same accolades that Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. did in that class. A kid out of Massillon. Big-bodied receiver. He can do a lot of things, but with the receivers that are coming up behind him, this incoming class, and just how talented they are, this is going to be a very important spring for him to stay in the conversation. Obviously, you're not going to run an in-state kid off or anything, but, what happens if, opportunity doesn't knock this year, and you sit there and you see the likes of Keon Grays, Caleb Brown, Caleb Burton, at all coming behind him, and then what's promising to be a very stellar 23 class. So I'll say Ballard there.
Yeah, Ballard was going to be my sneaky answer, because you normally think of this as being someone who's 3rd year on campus, maybe even 4th year. This is just his 2nd year, but there's just the way Brian Hartline recruits, there's just so much talent in that room that you can get past very easily by guys behind you. He's got a 1-year head start on those guys who are coming in this year. This is the opportunity to make the most of it. He's got the talent, but he was someone who, when he came in, you heard all sorts of Devin Smith comps because he's a Massillon guy. I think he wore Devin Smith's number in high school. So you heard all the Devin Smith comps. You know what Devin Smith was at Ohio State. Jaden Ballard potentially has the opportunity to be that, but you heard, he's going to take a year or two to develop. If he only took a year to develop, that would be very big for him to sort of stay ahead of those other guys on that depth chart, because the starting reps are going to be difficult to break into, and then there's going to be a lot of guys pushing for that second team reps. So yeah, this is for sure a big spring for him. Who is the star player? And this might be we'll do the quarterback show, and that's going to be a real easy answer here too. But Kevin, who's the big star player in the wide receiver unit this fall?
This guy out of Rockwall, Texas. I think his name is Jackson Smith and Jigba. Obviously, he had a performance for the ages at the Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all, and set all sorts of records there. But let's not forget, he had single season records. I mean, he was the leading receiver on the team last year with Chris Olave, with Garrett Wilson, and now he's still going to have a lot of talent around him, but he's far and away the number one on this team. And, there just aren't enough things that you can say about him. I think the biggest thing is is Ohio State going to keep him inside? Is he going to kind of move inside, outside? Are they going to try and find certain things that they like there? I mean, obviously, if he's not inside, you can put somebody like a Mega Buka inside. If you put him outside, to go back to an earlier show, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. What the passing game wasn't broken last year. I mean, outside of, there were when they couldn't protect the quarterback, it certainly was broken. When there were some issues there, it was broken. But in terms of offensive play calling, in terms of Jackson Smith and Jigba going out there, running crisp, concise routes, doing what he needs to do, and having a wide catch radius, I mean, he is far and away one of the best receivers in the nation going into the 22 season.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to look at him and go, well, yes, he did it last year, but he did it without, with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson out there with him. Well, his last game, he didn't have Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson out there with him, and he tied the school record, which he had just recently set for receptions in a game, set the school record for receiving yards by like 100 yards, and that was without Olave, without Wilson. So yeah, what is this year going to look like for him? So yeah, that is really exciting, because it feels like any record in the book very much in danger this year if Jackson Smith and Jigba can put it all together again this year. Who is the freshman here on the tight end side or the wide receiver side, and redshirt or true freshman? Who is the freshman that you're maybe most excited to see this spring?
Yeah, I love the incoming 2022 class of receivers that Ohio State has. It's hard to separate them because you're looking at a room where they're all between 5'11" and 6'1". They're all in that 165 to 185 pound range. They certainly all do different things. So it's not like, oh, well, they just, Brian Hartline just ran a copy machine and got 4 of the same guy. They're not they all fulfill different needs. But until we get an opportunity to see them, because they were just 4 studs on the high school level, how do you sit there and say that, okay, Kojo Antwi is going to do this over Caleb Burton or whatnot? So, I just am very excited about seeing there, because again, we've kind of touched upon some of the younger guys already, and I'm leaving one guy off because I think you may jump on that name. It's just, the future is so bright at that position, and Ohio State is just in such great hands in terms of wide receiver recruiting with Brian Hartline, and I just think that every year we're just going to sit there and look at the receiver room in terms of the recruiting for that first year and just sit there and watch and awe. And I mean, they're not going to come in here and take be able to immediately do everything day one. That's just not how it works out. I mean, you could be in a complex high school offense and then go into even the most simplistic collegiate offense and be completely lost. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but I'm going to be watching the freshman receivers.
Yeah, and I think you could pick, like you said, just about any of those freshman receivers, and it's a pretty good answer. Keon Grays is obviously someone I'm pretty excited about. Caleb Burton comes in as a very highly ranked player. Excited to see him. mentioned Ballard earlier as a redshirt freshman. I think he's probably the most intriguing in some ways of like, what is this spring going to mean for him? But one guy I think we got to talk a little bit about the tight ends here. Bennett Christian. He's someone who comes in with a little bit of size. He's someone who I think that they think may be big and physical enough to maybe handle the blocking responsibilities. So without a real locked-in starter at tight end, it feels like those 5 guys, you could sort of throw them up in the air, and wherever they come down, like they could come down in just about any order, and it wouldn't completely shock me. He's someone who maybe has an opportunity of the true freshmen, wide receivers and tight ends, to potentially be in that rotation maybe earlier than some of the other guys. So he's an interesting answer there as well. Last one, what is the biggest concern with the wide receivers or the tight ends?
I have one on each, and we'll start with the tight ends, and just who's going to be the guy that's going to emerge when the great Tom Orr says you could just throw them all up there and see kind of how they come out and whatever order they're in. None of them would really surprise you. Again, Ohio State doesn't need a tight end that's going to have 50 receptions and 11 touchdowns and this, that, and the other. Ohio State needs to have a good safety valve there. Somebody who can go off and have a big game if you kind of forget about him, but can go in and act as that 6th lineman, be able to do a lot of these other things that are called upon. So, I think Ohio State certainly has the dudes, but who's going to step up there? And then on the other side of the ball, or on the other side of the coin in terms of wide receiver, I think it's just going to be a matter of how do you keep all these guys happy? Jackson Smith and Jigba's going to get his, but how do you sort things out to make sure that Egbuka and Harrison and Fleming and then the young guys and Ballard, if he's able to work his way into the depth, how do you keep all of them moving in the right direction? And that's not saying that any of them have shown us, a presence that they may wander, that they may be like, well, I'm out of here. I'm not happy or what have you. But you still need to be able to spread the ball out, because let's be honest. Jackson Smith-Njigba had 91 catches last year, or 91 receptions. That's a big number. That was a single season school record. I think he could go to triple digits. But who's going to be the next guy, and how are you going to break it out to keep everybody moving forward?
Yeah, those are both very good answers, and that was going to be my exact answer on the tight end, is who is that dude? Because you've got a bunch of good possibilities at tight end, but who is that dude? Because you don't have the Jeremy Ruckert. This is definitely tight end number 1 this year. So I'm also going to take a little detour. Can Kam Babb stay healthy? Please, can Kam Babb stay healthy this year? He has had a really injury-plagued career. He got 1 year healthy, played the 2020 season, was a contributor, played on special teams a bunch, is so respected in the program. He was named a captain last year, even though he was hurt. Can he please get a healthy season this year? That would be really cool to see him. He's not going to probably ever get to be the 1,000-yard receiver that I think people were maybe thinking he might be coming out of high school, because he just has not been able to stay healthy. He keeps having knee injuries. Can he stay healthy this year and potentially contribute, potentially be a captain again this year? That would be very cool to see if that was the ending to his story at Ohio State. But definitely one of the most respected players on the team. It would be cool to see him get a chance to do it on the field this year as well. So that'll do it for wide receivers and tight ends, and we will have one more preview show. We'll be talking quarterbacks. I wonder who Kevin will pick for the star player at quarterback this year. It's impossible to say. Only one way to find out. Tune in on Monday when we have our quarterback preview for the spring. So thanks again to Kevin for joining me, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.